If you're still trying to understand Bitcoin, it can be pretty confusing to try to figure out what's true and what's not. There's a lot of contradicting information out there. I mean, you have some people that are like...
Charlie said Bitcoin's like rat poison. You were asked about that comment, and you said, well, it's probably more like rat poison squared.
Crypto puts the system at the whims of some shadowy, faceless group of supercoders and miners.
Bitcoin and ICOs, I agree completely. It's one of the crazier speculative things.
But then others that are like...
So volatility is, with Bitcoin, volatility is the price you pay for performance.
Is that it's not physical like paper money. But, think of how little we actually transact in paper money or cash today, right? And think of how something like the internet and email really changed the way we communicate over something like paper mail.
If you want to protect your purchasing power in a world of undisciplined monetary and fiscal policy, what you have a decentralized network of computers around the world that are securing that purchasing power, and they're defending it for you.
So who's right? Let's try to clear it up with a little bit of nuance, which from what I hear is not very popular on the internet. When it comes to Bitcoin, mostly what people talk about is price. But what actually makes the price of Bitcoin go up or down? When people talk about Bitcoin as an investment, sometimes they'll relate it to a stock, but it's not a stock. It doesn't have cash flows. It doesn't have dividends. There's no CEO. Bitcoin is more like a commodity. So when you think about oil, gold, wheat. So a lot of times you'll hear people say Bitcoin's not a productive asset. It's only worth whatever the next person's willing to pay for it. And yeah, all that is true, but that's true of other commodities as well. It's not specific to Bitcoin. So when people ask what makes the price of Bitcoin go up or down, it's simply supply and demand, just like every other commodity that has a financial market. So whenever you hear Warren Buffett say he doesn't like Bitcoin because...
And when you buy non-productive assets, all you're counting on is whether the next person is going to pay you more.
Understand that Warren Buffett is someone that's built his whole investment reputation on investing in stocks and companies, and he likes productive assets that have cash flows that he can value. Buffett's talked about gold in a lot of the same ways that he talks about Bitcoin.
For example, is gold. You'll find the compound rate maybe 1/10 or 0.2 of 1%, and then you have to insure it during that time and make sure somebody doesn't steal it from you and everything. But it doesn't produce anything.
So if Bitcoin is a commodity and its price is determined by supply and demand, why do Bitcoiners think that the price is going to go up? So when it comes to the supply of Bitcoin, we already know what the total amount of Bitcoin ever will be. We also know how much Bitcoin is being released into the market every year. That comes with the block reward that every miner gets when they produce a block. All that stuff is known. It's in the code. We can see it for ourselves. So if we know what the supply is and we know that it's fixed, it means that the only variable for Bitcoin's price long term is demand. If demand goes up, supply stays the same, price goes up. If demand goes down, supply stays the same, price goes down. So why do people think the demand is going to go up over time? When you look at what Bitcoin is, it's a censorship-resistant asset that allows you to have money outside of the traditional financial system. So if you're like me and you grew up in the US or a Western country, that may not mean a lot to you. But if you look at historically what's happened all across the world and what's happened more recently in places like Canada.
As you mentioned, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police has shared a list of names with the banks of people who've been involved in the protests. These are people whose accounts the law enforcement wants frozen.
There's a little bit more doubt than there was before about needing to have money that's outside of the existing financial system.
I'll say the same thing I said 6 years ago when it was at $80 a coin, which is it is the single best hedge against the traditional financial infrastructure. Whether you support fiscal and monetary policy or not, it doesn't matter. This is the schmuck insurance you have under your mattress.
You have countries like Venezuela who've had a long history of hyperinflation. Poor government monetary decisions has decimated the people of that country's ability to save for the future. And in those situations, Bitcoin can be used as a store of value that can be sent across borders. And even though it's still pretty volatile today, it's still lower than the volatility in their own nation's currency. Or even look at the war in Ukraine. It's pushed people to use Bitcoin as a way to transport their family savings across borders. And this is a common theme all across the world, especially in places where there's authoritarian governments. And so I know some people at this point will be like, okay, I get it. I understand, that sounds great, but don't other cryptocurrencies do the same thing? The quick answer is no, not really or at all. The only one that you can maybe argue that may have similar decentralized properties or at least growing decentralization is Ethereum. I just want to say, one, it's not as decentralized as Bitcoin, I think, by any stretch of the imagination. And two, it definitely has not been tested the way that Bitcoin has been tested over the years. I'm only bringing it up because it's more decentralized than most. but it's not really on the same level of decentralization and censorship resistance that Bitcoin is. Bitcoin truly stands on its own in that regard. So why does any of this matter, and why should you care about Bitcoin? Financial security to me means more than just net worth or having money. It includes being able to do whatever you need to do when you need to do it. Depending on where you live, trust in the existing financial system for everyday things may be fine. But in other places of the world, it's not. And when you don't have access to the financial system, it is devastating. I can't tell you what Bitcoin's price is going to be in a year, 10 years, or 100 years. At worst, maybe the price doesn't do much, but it's a global asset that I can keep, have, and use anytime my family absolutely needs it and we're good in a crisis. Believe it or not, Bitcoin doesn't have to be a religion. You don't have to hope and pray to bring down the whole system in order to be interested and benefit from Bitcoin. Because for me, it's much, much simpler than that. I do it for her and him and her to make sure that we're going to be good no matter what. That's why I Bitcoin. And that's why you should care about it too. Peace.